Hello, everybody, and welcome to the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey, and I'm joined, as always, by SamProof. Today, we're talking all about video and live streaming gear, what we use, how it works for us, and we'd love to hear from you as well in the chat. So we're going out live to all the various places. If you can let us know where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you. And also, what kind of equipment are you using for video and live streaming, and what is working well? What would you like to change? Perhaps what would you like to invest in? So that's all coming up on today's show. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, John. It's been a week. My youngest just turned 8, so it's been like birthday week. It's not apparently it's not one day anymore. I'm surprised it's not an entire month. This from April to May is like her birthday, my father-in-law's birthday, my birthday, which is a big one coming up, and then Betty's birthday. So it's like bang, 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 bang. It's just craziness. But that's what's going on. Plus, we have new foster kittens, all crazy stuff. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, it's funny you sort of mentioned that. I know some people who are a lot older than your daughters that do celebrate an entire month for their birthday. So that does seem to be a thing. But I'm doing pretty well. In some ways, it's been a really good week, really straightforward week. But in some ways, it has been tinged by a little bit of sadness.
Yeah.
I know, and again, I say this as an Australian, but I did want to acknowledge the fact that Sir Barry Humphries, the Australian comedian, who's probably best known for bringing us Dame Edna Everage, had passed away earlier in the week. And I'm such a huge fan of his work, and I don't know how well it translates to various places in the world, but there was something so rich and beautiful about his back catalogue. And I don't know. Grief makes you do funny things. I actually purchased, and again, you probably won't see this very well because
Nice.
of the lighting, but
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a very obscure 1989 CD that I managed to track down on eBay for an obscene amount of money earlier in the week. But it cracks me up, and I just love it. I guess the other thing that we do want to take some time to acknowledge is the passing of Terry L. Roth. Now, I'm going to try and not be too emotional in this moment. I do have a little bit of things to read, and then we might talk about him briefly. And we do actually want to dedicate this episode of the show to him. So
Yeah.
Terry was a celebrated musician known for his work with T. Roth and Another Pretty Face and Zen for Primates, though YouTubers will most likely know him better for the characters Zipstar and Loco Mama. And we were both quite honoured to know him during his lifetime, and we do send our heartfelt wishes to his family and friends during this difficult time. He really was one of the original YouTubers, and just had such a great sense of humour, just a really funny and clever human being.
Yeah, he was great, and he was a friend to everyone. So
Absolutely. So, like I said, we do want to dedicate this episode of the show to him. And a big hello to ElectroJed, who is also a fellow YouTuber,
yeah,
just acknowledging that he really was an OG in that space. So
he
thank you for
was.
joining us today.
Yeah.
Um,
No, Terry was.
okay.
I mean, he was at at the height of all of the changes of YouTube. He was like the forefront of all of that stuff. He was a prolific video uploader, and the first YouTube partner, if not the second. There's
I
some
think he was the
timeline
sec.
issues. He
I
was
don't know.
supposed to be the first, I
Yeah, I
believe.
don't know if it's actually true, but I have heard this bit of folklore that he was almost the first, but he missed a phone call, and then I think somebody else, maybe Michael Buckley, got that phone call.
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe.
I mean, you could probably look it up. And I guess the other thing I would say, in some places, depending on where you're watching this, I have actually linked out to some resources, including sort of Zipster's YouTube story. So
Yeah.
I'd encourage you to take some time and learn a little bit about him if you don't already know. But So this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about our video and live streaming gear. People can be a little bit nervous about, what gear they're using, and we're not professional gear reviewers. Like, we don't use everything, we don't try everything under the sun, but we did want to take some time today to really explore the things that we use and the things that we kind of find work well for us. Again, like I said earlier, if you are in the chat, I would love to hear about the things that you might be using, how well they're working for you, and maybe some of the things you might think about investing in the future. I guess, Sam, if we can start with, it's literally video, so let's start with our video cameras, and capture
Yeah.
devices. So, do you want to talk about yours first?
Sure. So I actually do have, in fact, a variety of cameras because aside from the fact that I have this setup, which has a variety of cameras, I have the kitten cam, which has even more. My primary camera, however, is this Canon. Um, it's the XA15. So it's a decent camera. It's not a webcam. It's better than that. I got this specifically because I didn't want that whole webcam thing of just like big in focus wide angle, everything. This like gives me some precise zoom in abilities. I can change the focus manually. It also has night vision. Um, and when I originally got it, I got it for specific purposes to pair with a PCIe card that I could switch between a bunch of them.
Nice. That's really awesome. I guess, yeah, and ElectroJet saying fancy schmancy, which definitely is. I mean, there are a lot of buttons on that camera.
There are.
Um,
I mean, it's
I
a camcorder,
Yeah, sure.
glorified, but it's a camcorder.
hmm I just mentioned the thing that I've been using for some time now is this one, the Sony ZV-E10, which is a great camera. Um, it's it has some quirks. I mean, I love it, and I do use it as a web camera, and it's physically attached to my computer 24/7 in a very particular way, which we'll talk about in a moment. Um, it has some quirks though, and I kind of, as much as I love the quality of the thing, and essentially I use this as a very fancy webcam, a very expensive webcam, if I'm being
I mean,
honest.
me too, really. I never
Yeah.
that thing never comes off its tripod.
And I guess a couple of things just to give people a heads up if you are interested in purchasing this camera, and it is a good camera. Like, don't get me wrong, but it does have some quirks. And number one is that you can actually connect this to your computer and use it as a webcam, with USB. But you do have to actually physically unplug the cable, turn the camera on, reattach the cable, and go from there. And it's not as high quality as the HDMI output. And the other thing too, which is kind of weird, as well. And I'm telling you all this up front. I genuinely love this camera, but I just want you to be aware of this. The other thing too is if you want to use USB as a power source,
Mm.
it has to be purely power. If you connect it to a computer with data as well, you won't be able to use that. You literally have the option of one or the other. So I've sort of got a little power cube that's sort of an extension for the power, and it has a few USB connections in there, and I use those literally just to power things and recharge things as we go along. But that said, it is a really beautiful camera. It has a number of really interesting features. I must admit, I barely scratched the surface on them because I have, and I'll show you this in a second, but it lives in a very permanent location 24/7, and I never touch anything except the on button, to get it going. So that's and again, I just want to acknowledge the fact, Electro Jed has this comment here. To be truthful, the
Yeah,
old school camcorders made the best webcams and
they
last the
really do.
longest.
Yeah, I wanted to say that what you were saying kind of reminded me that while I'm pretty sure this camera does have HDMI, I actually use an SDI out because I was using HDMI for my I have a knockoff GoPro from Yi Action, and that was using my HDMI in,
hmm
which is technically something else that we'll get into later. So yeah, this has been SDI and probably would be higher resolution if I went through HDMI. But the other thing I wanted to say was when I made this original decision, it was because I didn't want a webcam, but also the other option at the time was like to do a DSLR. And at the time, all of the DSLRs were not made with webcam in mind, so they have automatic shutoffs after like 30 minutes or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, which is why I went camcorder.
And there is actually a setting on this camera to turn that off. And if you actually go and look at my YouTube channel, you'll see that after we did one of these shows for an hour, we were trying to record a promo, and halfway through the promo, my camera just dies. So, you know, that's another thing to keep in mind as well. But and I feel like I'm really dwelling on all the negative things, but I genuinely do love this camera. And I know there are all kinds of variations on this camera. There's some much cheaper versions. Like I said, we're not really a gear review channel, so
Yeah.
I don't really know all the nuances with those, but they do seem to be a lot cheaper. But let's talk about, and we sort of alluded to it earlier, but actually bringing these cameras in, because these aren't necessarily designed to act as web cameras that you just attach with your USB cable and get going. I guess I'll start first on this one. So let me just find it from the list, and I don't think I uploaded it in the end, but it's the Elgato Camlink, which is a great little USB device that is really, really quite useful in terms of getting the output from this camera and actually bringing it in to the computer. And it does, and for this camera specifically, I do get a higher output quality via that mechanism. And again, I don't have to physically undo the cable and turn it on and reconnect it and all those annoying steps. We have spoken about this briefly in another show, but friction in the content creation process is such a thing. So I really want something that I can set and forget and just work with, and I can focus on showing up and talking. Okay, awesome. So it looks like you've got a picture of the. Yep. Okay. All right. Let me just show you this. So this is the Camlink in the box when I received it. So like I said, it's this little device that you plug into a USB connection, and then you can go from the camera to the HDMI. So yes, that's how I essentially bring this in. And we'll bring Sam back. So I know you've actually got a sort of, I understand you've got a larger capture camera. Talk to us about how all that works. And you appear to be muted. One moment.
Because I did all of the things when my kid came in, and now I've broken the illusion. So yeah, my camcorder actually goes into a different Elgato product, which is this very dusty PCIe card that is a Camlink Pro. I'm going to take that off screen right now because it's so dusty. Which has four SDI ins, one HDMI in, and an HDMI out if you want to throw that into a different monitor. So in theory, I could plug in 4 different camcorders through SDI and use that as a switcher. OBS recognizes each of those as their own individual camera source, which is great. So I don't have to like finagle 2 different softwares simultaneously. It just natively goes, okay, these are all cameras,
Nice.
which is how I used it previously, but I don't have that second camera anymore. I also have an extra, yet another Elgato. This is the HD 60S, which is just an HDMI. So that is the other ability I have to bring a camera in through a capture card. Also dusty,
Nice.
not as bad.
And I just want to say hi to a few people that are joining the chat. So hello to Walter Strong III. And I feel like I ask you this every week, Sam. How should I?
CG.
CG?
CG is, yeah, that's
okay.
that's
Hi,
how we call
CG.
it.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, CG. Hey, Walter.
We are talking today all about, and of course, Electrojet is there as well. So thank you for joining us. First of all, we love the participation in the live chat. That's awesome. But today we're talking all about our live streaming and video gear, some of the equipment that we use and what we like about it, and some of the gotcha things that you need to be aware of if you're using a similar setup. So we've been talking about our video cameras and our capture devices. So again, those are really useful things to think about. Let's talk about audio for a moment. So Sam, you've literally got a brand new microphone as of yesterday. So can you tell us about that, or should I tell everybody about that?
I mean, you might know more about it than I do. This is my first day really utilizing it. But yeah, thank you to John for this early 50th birthday present, which upgraded what used to be this Xingyu. That thing's gone, and now I have this guy,
And I
which
should
is
say, I don't think there's anything wrong with that old
no,
microphone,
the
but
Xingyu is a
it is
good
a condenser
microphone.
microphone, and it
Yeah,
really was capturing a lot of the higher frequencies
yeah,
and the fan and some of the background noise.
yeah.
Whereas the Samsung Q2U is this, and there's a photo of the packet. So it is sort of a dynamic microphone, so it's going to capture a lot less of that, which is really good for noisier environments. The other thing about that one, and I haven't even asked Sam this yet, but this is USB and XLR. I'm
Yeah.
curious, which one are you using today?
I'm going XLR into my Zoom H6.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's great, and I think that can be really useful. I can't believe I didn't upload a photo of this, but I do. I have a Rodecaster Pro, which is the original version. There is the second version now, and there are some new exciting things coming from Rode in the future. I guess in some ways this really is overkill for me. Like I love it, but it was kind of unnecessary. It was just something I really wanted to get. But the thing I do like about this in particular is that it uses a technology called ASIO, which brings in different tracks as different channels, and especially in OBS, I can literally have different inputs on different scenes. So when I have my opening sequence, I've got my music playing from the sound pad, which the audio is literally stored on this device, and I don't have my microphone going live. And I kind of mentioned this when I was talking to Tanya Smith recently, because I am kind of a slightly anxious, nervous person, and it would be very common for me to be muttering to myself before the show, and just knowing that that's not accidentally going out live is just a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got the ability to bring in audio via Bluetooth, so I could ring somebody on my cell phone and actually record a podcast with them. The quality probably wouldn't be as great as a real microphone, but that is another option as well. In this case, I'm actually using the Shure SM7B as this microphone here. Um, this is not a cheap microphone. This is the most expensive microphone I own, and I do
Yeah.
own some very nice microphones. But the slightly paradoxical thing about this microphone is it's very quiet, and that's both a curse and a blessing. So it's a curse in the sense that I actually needed to get another device to make sure the signal was loud enough to work in the original Rodecaster Pro. This isn't an issue on the newer one, but on the original, I do have a cloud lifter. But the nice thing about it is that I'm literally recording from my house, and if I had somebody maybe a meter away with a lawnmower, I would hear it through my ears, but you wouldn't hear it on this microphone. So
That's good.
it's a little bit paradoxical, and it's the reason I use this microphone. I should say too, I have lots of other microphones too. This is the Rode Procaster. I sort of started with the Rode NT1A, which is a beautiful condenser microphone, but I just kind of needed some extra things in terms of just making sure that the audio was okay, and those sort of obscure a fair bit of my face on camera. So I've decided to use this one. I don't know what that was, but it sounded
Sorry.
very dramatic, Sam.
Sorry. I bumped things. I think so. I didn't switch to the XLR cable that they gave me. I might need to do that. I think this
Ooh,
one's
okay.
getting old.
Okay. Yeah, that's
That's up
actually a
to you.
really good point, because I've purchased XLR cables on like eBay, and like they've just sounded terrible. That is actually a place you probably don't want to cut corners. Um, Okay, I just want to acknowledge some of the comments here, and as we go as well. So Electro Jed is saying I've had so many problems with OBS that I went to XSplit and VCam for streaming my boxing live talks and such. That's interesting. I'd love to hear more about that actually. Electro Jed,
Sorry,
let us
guys.
know in the. I'm just going to mute Sam for a second. So Walter Strong the Third is in here as well. What would you feel another viable podcasting equipment other than the Rodecaster Pro 1 or 2? There are so many out there, and like I said, I haven't tried them all out. Steinberg actually have some really good audio interfaces. The UR, I want to say it's the UR22. I'm just going to look this up while I'm talking about it, which is another one that I own this one. It's not physically connected to anybody. This is and they've actually brought out a newer version of this since with USB-C, which it was just a really great interface. I think it had sort of two inputs. I hear people talk about the Scarlett audio interface as a really good option as well. But getting back to like the microphone, the Samsung Q2U, it's literally a USB microphone. So if you're literally just recording yourself or you're talking on a call with somebody else, USB is actually a really good option to get started with. So yeah, there we go, sort of showing that on the camera. There are really lots, and actually, if like Walter, if that isn't just a general question, if that is something you are actually interested in exploring, send me a message. I'd love to hear more about that and maybe unpack some of those options. So the Focusrite Scarlett is one that I hear a lot about. They do just seem to do a lot of podcast promotion too. So I don't know if that's perhaps the reason I hear about it, but to be honest, we live in a really great time where most technology is really high quality. So it just depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you'd actually like to do.
Yeah.
But don't sleep on the and USB microphones used to have a really bad reputation, and I think we've moved beyond that. I don't think it's a problem. So if you don't want a giant interface, like if you don't want those extra features, feel free just to actually go and work with a USB microphone.
Yeah, no, I think they've gotten a lot better. I think the original USB microphones just didn't have as much a dynamic range, and their gain was a little lower. But I think that's all been, improved.
Nice. Yep. I guess the other thing we should mention too, while we're talking about audio, is I've got a boom arm here. Boom
Yeah.
arms are really useful, and Sam's got one as well. A lot of the time, the most simple thing I need to sort of tell people about audio and microphones specifically, you really want the microphone close to you and far away from other noisy things in your room. And I'm not calling anybody out, Sam. I'm not
Yep.
calling anybody out. But that's literally the best thing to do. And a lot of the times, especially with the Blue Yeti, they would put it on the table like a meter away from
Mm-hmm.
themselves. It would capture every ambient thing in the room and not
Right.
really the person speaking so much. So the
Yeah.
great thing about the boom arms is you can literally move it closer to you. You can move it out of the way if you're not actually talking. Arms are really great, and we'll talk about this in more detail later, but arms are a great way of keeping things off your desk generally. So if you do need a little bit more space, they can be quite useful in terms of doing that.
Yeah, that's why I love them, because I want less things on my desk.
Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little distracted by the chat, but Walter
Yeah.
was just saying that he's looking to improve the audio with his live stream show, and he's currently using the Audio Technica. That is another recommendation I hear a lot of.
It's a good brand. Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I kind of had
Really?
the other I'd
No.
heard other things, but again, I haven't really tried them, so I shouldn't be rushing to judgment. But
I
you
mean, I
know,
say that, but that's because I have the headphones. I don't know that I've used one of their mics in a long time, but I
mhm,
love my headphones.
yeah. And again, I guess the other thing too is if you can physically get one of these in your hot little hand and try it out and see
Yeah.
how it goes. And like if you are in a position where maybe you can try something and return it if it's not working for you, that would be good. I guess generally speaking, the thing because like, let's be real, a lot of this equipment is not cheap. It is
No.
an investment, and you really want to be pretty sure that it's going to do the thing that you want it to do before you spend that money. So there are two things that I really recommend for any kind of equipment is to, one, go online and read the manual. I know people hate reading manuals at the best of times, but certainly check out the manual. Don't assume it does the thing you want it to do. Make sure you check. But the other thing too is watch those YouTube videos. There are so many reviews. keep in mind that sometimes they may be paid for promotions.
Yeah.
So keep that in the back of your head. But if there's something you particularly want to do with your equipment, make sure you can see somebody physically demonstrate how that works. Because it can be really like you can get so swept up into the marketing and run out and spend $5,000 on something and then suddenly discover, oh, it doesn't do that one thing I wanted it to do. Okay, so let's talk about lighting. Lighting. Oh, right. Let's talk about lighting. So again, like you don't need an elaborate setup, especially if
No.
you're starting, but a little bit of strategically placed light can make a world of difference. I think I mentioned on the show a few weeks ago that when I first started with my Logitech webcam, I literally just had a desk lamp with a posable neck, and it's amazing how much better even that's just a bit of fill light helps me look on camera. What I actually do use at the moment, and I'll show you a photo of this later, or maybe even a video of this later. But I've got two Elgato key lights, and they're amazing. They're not cheap. I have to be honest about that. They're hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth. And I like them. I kind of the thing that blows my mind is just how bright they are, and I
Yeah.
literally only use like 4 to 5% of their possible brightness because that's all I need. But they're sort of on their own arms that they come with, and I've mounted those to the desk. I've got two of them, and yeah, I do have I turn on the light in this room as well, but that's really all I'm using. Sam, talk to me about your lights.
So I had a picture. I didn't upload it, but you can kind of see my light behind this camera here.
Hmm.
These were gifted to me. I don't even know. It was probably like an Amazon basic pack for like $120 for 3 or 4 lights. They're, multi-bulb in there, and they're in soft boxes. So they take up a good deal of room. They are on stands and the boxes, whereas your key lights are like flat panels, if I'm not mistaken, which
Hmm.
take up a lot less room. So that's what you're paying for. Plus, I believe you can control the color temperature to some extent. Is that right?
Yes, yes, you certainly can. And
Yeah.
the one slightly weird thing about the Elgato key lights is you operate them via an app via
Hmm.
Wi-Fi.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't want to stream on my Wi-Fi because I'm gonna lose that quality of connection. So what I do instead is I have the Elgato app on my phone, and I press a button to turn them on when I need them, and I do the same when I turn it off.
Yeah.
If I was on the same Wi-Fi connection, I could actually set up some buttons on my Stream Deck to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, what I might do, this is going to be a bit of spoiler for part of the rest of the show, but I'm going to play a really quick video clip. So check this out.
Yeah, those take up so much less room. um, what I wish I had uploaded that other picture, because what I've actually done since I'm in a garage is I have taken one of my stands. One of them is just normal, the one over here. The one over there, I've jerry-rigged, flipped it upside down, and jammed it into the rafters of my garage so that it is not on the ground. So it takes up a lot less space, which is nice. The box, of course, still takes up about 5 or 6 times as much space as your key light does. It's kind of crazy.
And I
But
guess like the other thing, like again, we're talking about our own personal setups, and these things work well for us. But I did speak to Tanya Smith on Stream Like a Boss TV a few weeks ago, and I know like a couple of things that she's mentioned is that if you're somebody who wears glasses, you need to be thinking about where the light is reflecting.
yes.
And she sort of had sort of a cheaper version of these sort of key lights, and ultimately went with more of a softbox approach because that
Okay.
just didn't create those reflections.
Interesting.
So it would be really I guess that's what you've got to think about and even just in terms of the controlling the color temperature,
Yeah,
like different people will need different things to look good on camera. So, it really is about exploring what works well for you. And I just want to have a look at this comment for a second.
sure.
So Walter's saying my wife would love for me to get the Elgato since they would save space in the living room versus my newer lights, which take up space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
There is definitely a trade-off, and it is a trade-off that you pay for, but it does take up a lot less space. It is quite nice in that regard.
yeah. If I had, if money was not an option, I would definitely upgrade to at least a couple key lights and replace these big guys right now. Yeah, although I don't even know, like that one, it would still have to be on a stand. So it feels like it's as out of the way as it would be if it was a key light. It's just the vertical space at that point. Um, But while we're talking about lights, in addition to practical light, I do also have all of these colorful lights, which is a combination of Philips Hue bulbs and then an LED strip from Govee. And those are any color you want. They can do all these fun different things like chases and dramatic movement and stuff like that. I'm picking all the scenes that apparently don't move. There, it's breathing. So if money is not an option and you want to spruce up your background, those are always nice. They couple with your Stream Deck, so you can do a couple quick buttons to like different scenes or different colors and things like that. I have both of these in this setup as well as the Kitten Cam. Technically, the Kitten Cam doesn't have the Govee lights; it has a knockoff, but it practically works the same way.
Nice. And I mean, they do certainly bring a certain ambience to you. I mean, obviously, the thing that you probably figured out in that clip that I just played a moment ago is that I'm in front of a green screen all of the time. So, I mean, I don't think that would work for me particularly
Right.
well, but I do
Sure.
see that a lot. And people sort of love that particular look. So again, if it works for your setup, by
Yeah.
all means, it probably is a good investment. Um, this is perhaps something people don't think of quite as much in terms of video equipment, but especially for live streaming, I want to talk about like our screens and monitors. And I guess in some ways it probably doesn't matter what you're using, but I mean I've got two Philips monitors and I've also got a an additional screen for my teleprompter, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the thing that the thing I love about my setup is that I've got my monitors on arms, and they actually allow me to reposition them, but also literally turn them from horizontal to vertical. And if I'm recording a software tutorial and then I want to use it for YouTube Shorts or TikTok, it's a great way of capturing that in an almost native way, so I can use more of the screen and not sort of blur it up unnecessarily large to fit it into the frame. Um, but in fact, I was sort of going to talk about this a little bit later, but I think let's do it now. So one of the things that
Sure.
I do use is a teleprompter, and this is a DesView. What is it? T3S, I believe. I'm sure I've got this on my list somewhere here. Um, Yep. So anyway, this essentially, and I've got it mounted by the Elgato multi-mount system. These are actually what they call strong arms. There's actually two of them here. One is for the teleprompter itself, and one is for the camera that's sort of inside of the teleprompter. And there are a couple of things we can do with this, and I've got a whole video on this. So if you want to go to Learn Live Streaming on YouTube, you can watch the whole video if you like. But essentially, I can either work with it with a camera. I'm sorry, not a camera. With either with a phone or an external screen. So the nice thing about the phone is that this will actually come with a Bluetooth remote, so I can sort of scan through what I'm talking about. But I have recently also purchased this Feel World monitor, which again essentially acts as a an digital display, so I can see, I can sort of have text on there that I can read, or I can, whatever I'm doing, but essentially have that reflected. It is important that you do have a device that will actually reverse the screen so it reflects properly in the glass and the mirror of the teleprompter. But those are a couple of things that I found really really useful. So maybe Sam, if you can, I think you have a picture there of your screens and the rest of your setup.
Yeah.
So talk us through that one.
Let's see. Is there a good setup for this? Yeah. So I have 3 monitors. And the two on the left there. I was trying to find a good. How do I make it? I guess I can't make it full screen because it's not the right resolution. But anyway, aspect ratio. So the left and the center, those are both LG. I don't know the models, but they are very lightweight, and they are on a combined 2-arm mount. That mount, it's a cheapie. It's from Extreme Pro, so like it's solid, but it's not. I don't know. I wish it was easier to adjust that sort of center height. That
Mm-hmm.
you need a mallet. Once this thing's in place, you're like, if I want to move up or down, I'm going to need a hammer. Um, However, it does allow for the monitors themselves to go 360 degrees. I can flip them vertical and landscape and tilt them and all that good stuff. And then on the right, I just have an old Toshiba, which is permanently in that vertical position. There's actually a monitor behind me, which is I don't even know what brand that thing is, Dynex. Most of these were actually just hand-me-downs. So they've kind of just been prioritized in like, this is the newest one, which is the LGs, which are, I'm pretty happy with. The color on those is the best. So those have taken over my sort of main positions. So I wanted to point out, this is kind of my stream setup on these screens. So on the left, you'll see OBS. In the center, I have StreamYard for when I do that particular show. If I'm not doing the game show, then OBS takes front and center, and Discord hits the other monitor. And then on the right, I have actually 2 chat windows. One is the SamProof chat at the top, and the one on the bottom is the Kitten Cam chat, just in case a big raid happens and I need to address people. During our show, I have our show notes open and the chat as well. So yeah, just thought I'd point that out. For just while we're here, the Kitten Cam, it's 2 monitor setup, and these are like old monitors from my setup that I passed on to the Kitten Cam. So we have one that's permanently OBS and one that's permanently chat in the vertical position. And there you go. That's what we got going on.
Nice. I particularly love seeing the cute avalanche setup. That looks amazing.
It's very compact.
Yes, very nice. So this is the video and live streaming show. I'm John Lacey, and I'm joined as always by SamProof. Today we're talking all about our video and live streaming gear, the things that we use, the things that we find useful. We're probably a good opportunity for you to reflect on your own use of video equipment. So if there's something that you love using, or maybe you're struggling to use, or you maybe are thinking about investing in something new, we'd love to hear about it in the chat. So let us know. We're going out live to all the various places, so it'd be great to hear where you're watching us from. So I guess, I did have down here to talk about rigging. And to be honest, I think we've probably covered it already, but
so, yeah.
I'll just very briefly show you this again. So essentially, everything is attached to the Elgato multi-mount system for me. Those vertical things actually came with the lights themselves. And I think, honestly, that's part of the reason they're so expensive, because you get the mounting equipment and the lights.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about this is that I bought a couple of strong arm mounts, and again, they sort of hold up both the camera and the teleprompter unit. So that's been really, really useful for me.
I wanted to ask, do those strong arm mounts telescope, or are they set length?
No, they are a set length, those ones. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So there are other ones. I guess the other thing that I was quite concerned about, and the reason I don't have it's really sort of a phone-sized teleprompter rather than a tablet-sized. And that was just because I was concerned about how much extra weight I could have coming off that single pole.
Sure, yeah.
But to be honest, like for my purposes, it really works out well. It's funny, people have a lot of feelings about teleprompters, and some people are like, I can't read. And I'm like, well, that's great, but maybe that means you need to work on your reading skills. But the thing that really sold me was that once I had it installed and I had a, I don't know, 1-2 minute video, and I just read it perfectly on the first take. I
Yeah.
thought this is going to save me years of my life. Like it is so useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we could talk a lot more about in the future, but really, I think there's a misconception that you're reading like a novel worth of script off a teleprompter, which doesn't have to be the case. You know, if you are not the person that can write out everything and reverberate it and regurgitate it back out, and maybe there's different use cases for it. Maybe you use bullet points, maybe just some sort of small notation. I think what you do, you have like OBS running on it. That's a use that I wouldn't have thought of. Like everyone thinks I'm just reading on it, but really it's anything you can do to keep your eyes on the camera and maximize your, condense your space really. So I think that's a great use for it that the normal person might not have thought to do.
Absolutely. And I guess, and I have mentioned this on the show at other times, but somebody who works for a company that sells a device that essentially lets you put your webcam on top of your screen, sort of dropped into my DMs, and they're like, "I notice you're looking away from the camera a lot," and I thought, there's a reason for that. And like but now for this show, for example, like I literally have restream in the teleprompter, so I'm trying to look at that
Yeah.
more than I do elsewhere. You will see me actually look away from the camera when I'm reading the comments, because again, it's a little bit too small to see on my teleprompter unless I use the Windows magnifier, which I do sometimes. But I guess it's great to have that eye contact, but you don't want to be robotic. And I know, and I'm sure I've ranted about this recently as well, but there's literally tools now that will use
Yes.
AI to make it look like you're looking at the screen, whether you're maybe the back of your head is facing the camera. Like it's so unnatural and so weird, and I don't recommend it. But I wouldn't stress about those things, because
No.
obviously there's like you've shown your setup. There's a lot happening when you're doing a live show.
Yeah.
Um, I guess if we talk about some of the accessories, so obviously I've mentioned the teleprompter. One thing that I guess can be sort of easy to take for granted sometimes is just having an extra hub. So if you need extra HDMI outputs or USB inputs, just having a hub that can connect to your computer, especially like if you're streaming on a laptop and you've got a setup where you can just connect the laptop and disconnect it and go, that can be quite useful as well. Obviously in that video I played earlier, I do show the fact that I've got a green screen. I'm always behind it. Or it's always behind me. And you saw in that video all the crap that's behind me when I don't have this in place. And I thought that was a good peek behind the curtain, because again, green screens are one of those weird things that people have a lot of feelings about, and it's always worked so well for me. I love being able to put myself in the action of a software tutorial. And I just love the ability to sort of control what people are looking at. And I know, and again, I'm not calling anybody out. I've been saying that so much lately. I kind of worry I might be, but by all means, if you have the space and you can sort of set something up interesting that's behind you, that's great. But I guess the other thing I would say though is don't make it too elaborate or complicated, because at the end of the day, we want the viewer to focus on what you're saying and not the
Yeah,
shiny thing behind you. And I
that's
know
true.
there's a particular love of neon signs and branded neon signs, which are, that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, I just you don't want to distract too much from your message and the things that you're communicating, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. And like there is definitely a trade-off. I used to have the green screen set up and I used to have just a solid, for those of you who remember me back in the YouTube days, not a solid, but like an abstract art that was behind me for the most part, which is right over there. Um, and while I like both of those things, green screens present a problem that, any little movement you make, you may need to adjust that green screen chroma key setting. And I just got sick of it. And I was like, I just want practical. I have the space. I want a practical thing. I have to keep it maintained. It is not clean by any standard. But, each thing has a trade off. So it's, do what you do what you feel is within your personality to keep at its peak condition.
Absolutely. And it's I I don't even know that I had the words right now, but I just see so many people online say you're doing it wrong and this is the only way to do it and I'm the expert and you have to use my system. And it's like, honestly, I'm not your parents, I'm not your boss. Do what you
Right.
like, but don't feel bad about it. Like there are so many people that are like, "Oh, if you don't adopt this approach, then you're wrong and stupid." And it's so dumb. Like don't even listen to those people. Just do what works for you and, move on with your life. Um and try things out, the thing about the green screen specifically, and I don't know if I've just had some sheer dumb luck, but I haven't had a lot of issues with lighting it or,
Mhm.
or even adjusting the settings too much. Occasionally it'll be a problem. Um, I'm the filter in OBS do the chroma key to remove that is really useful. The only thing I would say is that a lot of programs have sort of a pretend green screen option in them,
Right.
and they don't work well. Even if you're in front of a physical green screen, they're really weird, and they will cut bits of you out of the frame, and then they'll suddenly reappear, and I'll think, does my coworker have this new haircut? It's like, no, Microsoft Teams just can't decide where their hair ends and
Yeah.
the background
Mhm.
begins. And it's funny because I physically have a green screen behind me. I thought they would do a much better job of doing that, but they don't. So I'm always using the virtual camera, even in sort of Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams and things like that. So again, like we're here to talk to you about what we're using and what we find useful, but you kind of need to decide what works well for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Walter's got a question about using. What are your thoughts on using a green screen that is a solid color as a background of your settings? So, there's probably nothing wrong with that. Again, as long as it's not too distracting from you as the presenter on screen. Because I guess that's the other thing. It doesn't necessarily need to be a green screen. It could just be a background. It could be, Sam alluded to the fact that in his early days of YouTube, he would have that painting behind him most of the time, and that was part of his branding. So again, as long as it looks presentable, I wouldn't stress about it too much. And if you do, you can actually buy sort of these green screen setups that allow you to change the particular fabric that you're using on them. So photographers have traditionally used those a lot. So again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think just make sure it's not too distracting, it's not too busy. You don't want, as long as it's not distracting from you, I don't think there's really a problem there. So, try it out and see how you go.
So if I'm reading this right, it's just you have the green screen behind you and you're not chroma keying it out. You're just leaving it there
That
as a
that was my
solid background.
understanding.
My
Yeah.
my one comment on that is just be careful because people are going to use that.
Yeah.
Like, they're
That
like,
that that
well,
is a
I
good
can chroma key
point.
that out on my side and put
Yes.
you in, a pirate ship or
Hmm.
whatever, like suddenly you're talking about the LA Zoo without knowing it. I don't know.
Actually, that is a great point, and that didn't even occur to me. But you do see these things on social media where a politician has worn the wrong color shirt, and I
Oh yeah.
guess when it's a still image, it's even easier to sort of replace those things. But I like to pretend we live in a nicer world than that, but we probably don't. So that is a great observation. But yeah, I like to be honest, whatever works. And like I said, like I'm not anti just having a real background either. Like that's fine if you can set that up as long as. And you saw in the back of the video that I played earlier. Like my green screen doesn't cover my entire background. There is some cropping that happens, and like
Mhm.
without it, you could literally see the clothes that were hanging up in the background. So,
Right.
you just got to think about what you do. And again, because I'm kind of constrained to a particular part of my frame, I try not to move around too much. And I think some people would think of that as being a terrible constraint, but when it comes to editing, because I'm not moving so much, it looks really natural if I have to cut out an entire section.
Yeah, I mean, if
So
you wanna
that's
turn
been
yourself into a vertical video, it's pretty easy, whereas I'm
yes.
doing this,
Yes.
moving my
It's
hands
funny.
around.
Alan Alda, from MASH has his own podcast. And he spoke to a woman recently about talking with your hands and how useful it is for being expressive and taking some of your cognitive load off it. And I think, yes, on the one hand, that's great, but on the other one, if I had $1 for every time Sam whacked his boom arm or his
That's fair.
microphone,
You'd have at least $3. So
I think it would be a little bit higher
a
than
little more?
that, but yes, yeah. So again, like these are all good things, and we love them, and just do what makes sense for you, because and again, this isn't really the subject of today's
Yeah,
presentation, but you really do need to be you when you go live. Like there's no point trying to be somebody else. There's no point trying to put on a facade. Um, by all means, be the best version of you you can be, but you still need to be you. So don't. It can be so easy to obsess over the most trivial things. And I really want you to come back and think about what is your message and what is your value and how are you going to share those. So I feel like we went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I hope it was useful. Thank you for that
yeah,
question, Walter. I guess, and again, I don't know if software necessarily translates as gear, but I think it's worthwhile talking about. So
definitely.
tell me about some of the software that you use, Sam.
Sure. For streaming itself, I mean, I think if anyone doesn't know, primarily we use OBS Studio, then they haven't been paying attention. But yeah, that is 98% of the time. If I'm streaming, it's the OBS Studio software. I do one show at the end of every month on Wednesdays where we use StreamYard. And for Cute Avalanche, again, we're using OBS Studio for the majority of the streams, but we do occasionally do like an overflow when we have cats outside of the stream room, which previously we were doing through Restream, and then they like changed their price structure, and we were like, no, screw that. So now we just go direct to YouTube through their own, actually through OBS at this point. But sometimes we'll do like the mobile app and do that. So yeah,
Nice.
for streaming, that's the software. When we get some more software in a second, John.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, you if you've been here a hot second, you know I love OBS, and I talk about that a lot. Obviously I'm using OBS, and I actually use OBS. Like I use the virtual camera even when I'm going to other things, like we do this show in Restream Studio, for example. I also use Restream to broadcast from OBS directly. But even talking to Tanya, she ran her show through Ecamm. I'm
Mhm.
still sort of joining within the virtual camera for the green screen benefit and the branding in the background and stuff. So it's always part of my setup, no matter what I do. But I guess the other thing too, like in terms of actual editing software. And it's funny, I was going to mention this like 5 minutes ago while we were talking about green screens. But I use TechSmith's Camtasia product to edit things. And I use that because its superpower is really capturing your screen when you're doing tutorials. And I've done a whole show on why that is awesome. They've just released their 2023 version, and it does have sort of an AI remove background feature.
Mhm.
Um, my my very early experiments with it make me think it's probably not as great as actually using a real green screen. So if that is important to you, you should sort of stick to that approach, I'd say, and use the remove a color feature. But that is great editing software. I do 95% of my editing in that software. I actually do use CapCut to burn captions onto my videos.
Yeah.
And that's literally the only part of CapCut that I really use. I know it can do all the things, and
Mhm.
I'm sure Sam will talk to us in another show about that. Um, but I sort of use those two products in terms of editing. I do use a program called Happy Scribe for transcriptions. And again, I bring those out of Happy Scribe and put them into Camtasia, and then I move them over to CapCut, which I know sounds like a lot of work and probably is, but I have I'm a bit of a control freak, and I have a very particular way of working with my captions, and that's important to me. But Sam, talk to us about editing software for
Yeah,
videos.
so I am using CapCut for pretty much everything at this point, and I do use the auto caption, which I like. I do think it's a it's both really nice, and also I find it a little limited. Like you could do some way fancier things with like an Adobe Premiere or After Effects if you wanted like very specific things. If you ever see like those vertical videos where like individual words are popping out and like have different background colors, that's not going to happen in CapCut. And if it is, it's I don't even know how. But it does do some quick, easy, like all caption adjustments, which are great. So you're like going through it and you're like, wait, this style is just not working for me. I've already auto captioned everything. I have 50 different captions plus. And you make one small addition. You're like, no, this needs to, and you can do it to everything at once, which is great. I do use it primarily for everything at this point, where I was previously an Adobe Premiere editor. I have moved pretty much my entire process into CapCut. So yeah, that is my tool at this point.
And again, I don't really use it. Like I use it sort of once a year, probably. But I just wanted to mention, DaVinci Resolve is
Yeah.
it's a really powerful program, but it does come with quite a learning curve. So, and I guess the other thing I would mention just casually, it was like 3 gigabytes to download the installer for that program. So just make sure you think about your internet connection
Yeah.
before you do that. But it could be another thing. But again, just keep in mind that you will need to invest some time in learning that. But there are plenty of great resources out there. So I
Yeah.
think that's something I would like to do in the future. I guess while we're talking about software, let's talk, about some of the things maybe on the fringes of our video and live
Mhm.
streaming productions that we use. For this show, we share a lot of files via Google Drive,
Yeah.
and we do actually have our show notes in Google Docs. I actually use, and I know this is going to sound so weird, and we've spoken about it before on the show, but I actually use Microsoft PowerPoint to create all my thumbnails. And I've done an entire show on that on my channel if you want to check that out. But it's funny. We have this association that it's like death by PowerPoints because people have used it badly. But as a graphics tool, it's kind of amazing. And if you already have the Microsoft Office suite, it's just sitting there waiting for you to check it out.
Sure.
And the nice thing about that is I have a single file with all my thumbnails in it. I just duplicate different things that I've done before and rearrange text and images. Because I have very particular branding elements that I use from time to time. So, those are some things I use.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you also incorporate into your processes, Sam?
Sure. Yeah. Aside from Google Drive, for like note taking and sharing things like that, I also use Mega for file storage and sharing. Sometimes we transfer if it's a quick and easy one. For thumbnails and things and graphics like that, I use Canva a lot. I used to do a lot of Photoshop, and I've just kind of moved over to Canva. It's quick and easy. I don't generally need to do a lot of the more finesse things that I may have previously done in Photoshop, with like removing backgrounds and stuff. You can do that pretty easily through a bunch of web tools and stuff. So yeah, most of my graphics are now Canva based. And then as far as project management, again, I use a lot of Google Sheets and Docs to like document my processes, but I use Slack and Trello for the actual project management. So different notes will be passed back and forth through Slack, and then ultimately there's a card on Trello for like, this is the video, and then this is the process it's in. It's in, this column is draft, this column is shots, this column is, post-production, things like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I have seen Sam's spreadsheets. They're really quite elaborate. Um,
A little messy.
it's funny. I created a really basic spreadsheet for this, and I thought maybe it'll be daunting for people to look at. But Sam, of course, is such a geek and has been since he was quite young, so he was completely unfazed by that. So that's awesome. We love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, today we have been talking about our favorite live gear, live streaming and video equipment and gear and software. I guess, before we come to wrap up today, Sam, where can people learn more about you and what's your content and all those good things?
Sure. You can find me at samproof.tv, and you'll find my links to everything there. I do occasional shows on Twitch at this point. Right now, I'm focusing mostly on Cute Avalanche, so it's more stuff over there.
Nice. And if you want to catch up with anything I'm doing, you can head over to johnlacey.com. There are links to all the social things in the footer of that site, and we have a whole bunch of articles on OBS and other things. So I'd love it if you check that out. Feel free to connect with me wherever you're watching this. I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, I guess Sam, do we have any sort of final thoughts about, what you would like to maybe like how well do you think your setup is working? Are there things that you would like to change moving forward, or are you pretty
Yeah,
happy?
sure. I mean, I'd love to get more, just a million more cameras. No, uh, I think it's funny. The one thing that jumps out to me is like, this is the thing I need, and it's for the other room, is I want a USB hub. All of my USB hubs are horizontal, so they're butted up against each other. And if you
Hmm.
have one big thing like that cam link, suddenly you've lost 2 slots instead of one. So I need one
Yes.
that's vertically aligned. That's my big ask, is like, I need a vertical USB hub. And you?
Yeah, that's amazing, and yeah, I totally like the camera link is quite a thick device, and I have that exact same problem. I just have one less USB connection, but to be honest, I'm reasonably happy with my setup at the moment. It's funny, in my newsletter this week, I sort of teased that I might have a studio tour, but my desk is still a hot mess. So if there's anything I need to change, it's probably just cleaning up a little bit more, and making sure
Yeah.
that I don't have a million CDs on the table. Um, I guess because I've got the teleprompter and the video camera there all the time, I do need to be a little bit mindful of how I position my monitors.
Hmm.
And at the moment, I probably would want one of my monitors to be a little bit lower, but at the Rodecaster is physically directly underneath it, so that's something I might need to tweak. But I guess the other thing too I didn't mention was that I am sort of on a sit-stand desk, so I
Oh
can
yeah.
sort of raise this up and down. But even then, and this is possibly a whole other show, but as someone who does spend a lot of time in front of the computer, every part of my body creaks and aches from time to time. So I do need to be very mindful of that. But I think for the most part it's working, and I think we're both gear enthusiasts. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, you don't want to get too swept up into the FOMO. And like obviously the Rodecaster Pro has come out. There were going to be more things like the Rodecaster Duo is coming soon. But this old faithful unit still works fine. I don't need anything extra. So I think sometimes just taking a moment to appreciate what you've got is really really useful.
You know what? We did a whole show about our tech, and somehow, as opposed to every other show, we didn't mention that we both use Stream Decks. Every other show, I think we mention this
Hmm.
all the time. Somehow we didn't do that this time. But yes, we both have Stream Decks. So I would add one of the more recent versions of the Stream Deck. What is it called? The Stream Deck Plus, the one that has the knobs. That's
Yes. Yep.
that's on my wish list as well as an upgrade,
Hmm.
but not as a replacement. That would be in addition.
Sure. All right, so this has been the video and live streaming shows. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for those in the chat, especially. We love to hear from you. We'll be back roughly the same time next week to talk about some more topics. If there's anything you want to hear us talk about specifically, let us know. We'd love to hear from that as well. But until next time, have a great week.
No, and I would say take pictures of your setups, post them somewhere, and tag us. I want to see it.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be awesome. Thanks, everybody.